Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute, and I want to welcome you today. Our guest today is Mayor Alan Arakawa of the island of Maui. And I remember many, many years ago when I was a boy, there was a song called Puff the Magic Dragon, and that was all I knew about Maui. It was this mystical place where there was a land of Hanalei. Then all of a sudden, when I came back from college, everybody in the world knew about Maui. We said, here today, gone to Maui. What a tremendous transformation. Certainly part of that transformation continues today under Mayor Arakawa's leadership as the world comes to Maui, sometimes bypassing Oahu. We're here to pick his brain, learn about his wisdom that he has in leading a very challenging yet very promising place, which has global attention. So please welcome with me today, Mayor Alan Arakawa. Mayor Arakawa, thank you for joining us today.
Good to meet you, Keli'i, and good to be able to have a discussion.
Well, I am delighted. You know, I've been an admirer of yours for a long time because the way you've run your job as a mayor has certainly become to notice of everybody. But I wanted to ask you this question right off the bat.
Sure.
You are the mayor of Maui. Nothing wrong with Pittsburgh or Burbank or other places, but what is it like to be the mayor of Maui, of all places?
Well, first of all, you know, Maui is no Kauai in many people's minds, and it is one of the best places that you can look at. We're doing very well economically. We're noted for our sand beaches, our hotels, a lot of tourist destinations. We have many, many different programs that are tops in the nation. Our Kaunua Senior Service, our MEO bus transportation and programs, our telescopes on top of Haleakala, the supercomputer that we have. So there are many, many things that we have that are phenomenal.
Yes.
But it also gives us a tremendous responsibility.
That's right.
And we have to live up to our reputation. And you know, there's an old saying, you work really hard to get to the top, but it's even harder to stay on top.
Well, I can imagine that. You know, recently Condé Nast did a release of the best islands in the world, and I recall your comments in the news because on their list, not that it makes all the difference in the world, well, Maui slipped a little bit, but I loved what you had to say about that.
Well, it's a given unless we continue to completely renovate and recreate, moving into the modern world. There are lots of communities that are trying to compete with us. When we're looking at different tourist destinations globally, the numbers are just staggering as to how many different places are now trying to compete for those tourism dollars. You know, Hawaii, unless we can constantly be renovating our concepts and modernizing a lot of what we're doing and adjusting to the world market, we're going to not stay in one place. We're going to start sliding backwards. Historically, when you look at most of the major tourism destinations, they climb, they attain a peak, and then they drop off. And Hawaii has climbed, we've attained a top rating. Now our job is to try and maintain that rating. And it's going to do this kind of a thing because there are a lot of new places that can introduce new concepts, new ideas, brand new buildings. As they're developing these places, it's going to be much, much fancier. So we have to be able to compete.
Well, perhaps later in the program we'll talk a bit more about tourism and attracting tourists to Maui and to the state. But you know, we're in a political season right now, and it's no secret that many people have actually encouraged you to consider someday running for governor. But you have a characteristic response that you actually love being mayor so much. That, why is it that you're resistant to pursue the governor as a role, and you love being a mayor so much?
Well, let me give you a sort of a brief rundown. You know, all of us do things in silos. We tend to work with people that we know, people that we like. And Honolulu, which is the center of the state for population base, if you live in Kailua, you tend to have a silo in Kailua. But that silo in Kailua very seldom interacts with the silo in Ainahaina, or the silo in Waianae, or the silo any place else within Oahu. And even in Kailua, that one silo can be broken down into literally hundreds of different silos. The contractors work with the contractors, the doctors work with the doctors, and those groups don't talk to each other. So you literally have thousands of little silos throughout Honolulu. And because people don't talk to each other, it's very hard to get a cohesive movement to be able to change anything dramatically. Now, on Maui, we have a population base that is about 160,000 residents and about 40,000 plus or minus tourists a day. It's about 200,000. Our group is just large enough so that we don't have the ability to ignore any other group. We're small enough so that we don't have the talent pool that's as expansive as Honolulu, but yet our silo is much bigger than Honolulu's silo because everybody works together.
Does it enhance your silo, so to speak, the fact that you've got more than one island you're dealing with? You're bringing together Lanai, Molokai as well.
Lanai, Molokai work with Maui.
Maui.
It's a county. Hana works with Maui. It's part of our county. Now, when you put all of this talent together in one place, and you've got this huge pool of people pushing in one direction, you can actually achieve a lot. You know, when we put our public works together, we say, let's do an analysis. We used to have about a 50-year maintenance schedule. Now we're down to a 20-25 year. Why are we at 20 to 25? Because that's how long the asphalt lasts. So instead of patching, now we're digging out the entire road, going to the base core, and paving.
Sure.
We're doing that with each of our departments. We can completely reconfigure government because we're not so entrenched that we cannot move. At the state level, when you look at the Department of Education, how can you expect the Department of Education to ever manage the Department of Education when they can't even plan their own maintenance schedule because the state legislature wants to mandate which building is going to be granted funds and what kind of books. You cannot manage an organization that you cannot have control over. And the fact that there are so many competing factors, like the state legislature with the Department of Education, it's hard to manipulate the system that is as large as it is to be able to make major changes. Because one community will say, I want this, the other community will say, I want that, another one, I want something else, but they can never get together and say, this is the direction we all need to go.
In other words, you can do some things in Maui County that could never be done from a federal level or a state level. Let me throw one out to you.
Sure.
For example, it's no secret that really here in Hawaii we botched the super ferry,
Right.
which was a statewide initiative run by the state.
Right.
But you're operating ferries now within three island county.
Right.
Is this an example of being able to accomplish something that is easier to do at the county level than at the state?
As the transportation system with the airlines has shifted, although airlines are no longer in existence, the need came about to be able to create transportation systems. So we have ferry operators going to Molokai, we have ferry operations going to Lanai, and we've literally built those operations up to a level that we can travel between the islands.
So in more general terms though, how can you accomplish this when as a state we can't accomplish having a ferry system?
Because we know what we want, and all of the different counties are working, the parts of our county are working together. At the state level, you can't get the groups to work together. And again, I use the DOE example, but let's take the Department of Health, let's take DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources. All the different segments cannot get together to say, okay, we have a shortage here. Let's all go to the state legislature and let's work on building the group to the level that we need. Let's make sure we have enough people to be able to manage our forests. Let's make sure we have people that can manage the oceans. We have more private entities on Maui that are managing various parts of the experimentation and the research than the state does in totality.
And this is not only statewide, I mean, businesses that operate in the state. You've got international businesses and nations working in Maui, isn't that right?
But the groups are all working together.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a smart grid program. We're working with NITO and the Hitachi group from Japan. They're sponsoring us to the tune of $30 million. And we actually have, well, just the other week, we had 13 people from 10 different countries that represent electric companies from their nations that were studying what we're doing. And we're talking about big countries like India, Pakistan, Mongolia, and small countries like Vietnam, Korea, Japan, you know, they're down here looking at what we're doing.
Well, it sounds like Maui County is a great model of something you and I talked about when we visited your office last year, something at grassroots we call competitive federalism. It means getting power away from the federal government down to the state government and ultimately to the county level, and having good counties and cities model and compete with each other, and that's a great driving force. What is your thought about that?
Well, I attend the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and the Vice President Joe Biden spoke to us several times. And as he was speaking to us, one of the things he pointed out very clearly, Washington is a deadlock. Nothing is happening in Washington. The economic improvements that are needed, the changes in programs and policies, nothing is happening in Washington because they're all at deadlock fighting politically. The only way things are going to move is at the mayor's level, where rubber meets the road. In every county within the United States, it's the local government now that is actuating many of the programs and the economic development. It's not coming from the federal level. It's not coming from the state level. It's the local governments. So Maui is not an exception. It's one of many, many counties, and that includes the counties in the state of Hawaii, that are now altering the programs, the core programs, to be able to take care of our communities. When we look at the big programs, and you look at, for instance, the health programs, you know, we're looking at the health programs that have failed because the funding is bad, the way it was put together was bad, and you know, even with the Hawaii Health Connector, we can see how it's not working. Many of the seniors and many people that are on different health programs are seeing the benefits cut. The different health insurers are now scrambling to try and adjust what they can cover and what they can't cover. And when it was being sold, it was everybody's going to get universal coverage, you're going to be covered for everything. We knew that wasn't practical. But at the federal level, they didn't even read the document. Now they're admitting this is not possible. Economically, it won't work. We have to get to the point where what we're really working with is practical. And at the county level, everything has to be vetted by the community. Now,
there's all that much more accountability because people live at the county and city level.
Well, there's an absolute accountability.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about what is the role of the mayor,
yes.
Question. Okay. The way that it works is kind of simple. The legislative body of our government receives the complaints, and they talk to people and say, well, we've got problems, right? And let's go talk to the administration to find the solutions. They don't actually ever solve the problems. They talk about it, and they try and find rules and ways to manipulate, but they don't ever put asphalt in a pothole. They don't ever fix a water pipe. They don't ever have to fix a sewer system. They don't ever have to be able to take care of flooding. The fundamental things that make the government run are done by administration. And the administrators don't have the luxury of being able to say, if you're coming to me and saying, I have a pothole that I need fixed, I don't have the luxury of saying, well, you know what, let me refer it to our legislators. That's not an acceptable response. Everyone that comes to us as the administrators want a solution, and they want it yesterday. And if we're not able to provide that solution, it's not going to happen, and they know it's not going to happen.
Well, I would like to ask you when we come back from a short break about how Maui has somehow managed to outpace the entire state in terms of tourism. In an industry in which Hawaii is struggling today, what is it that has taken place on the island of Maui? We're here today with Mayor Alan Arakawa, who is the mayor of the island and the county of Maui, and we'll be right back after this short message. This is Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina. Don't go away. There's more coming.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel. I'm host of Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, which is our flagship show, which plays 4 to 5 p.m. every Wednesday. And the supporters of that show are Hawaii Energy Policy Forum and Hawaii Energy. And luckily enough, we have representatives of both of them right here today to tell you more about what they think about the show. Sharon Moriwaki at my left is co-chair of Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, and she goes first. Sharon?
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. I'm so glad that we have this Hawaii, the state of clean energy. This was 2 years ago when we started this, and we have continued it because it's so important, and there's so many developments happening across the state. And we hope you'll tune in every Wednesday, 4 to 5. It's wonderful.
And Ray is Hawaii Energy. Ray, what is your thought about the same subject?
Well, I agree completely with Sharon that we are talking about every Wednesday, 4 to 5. We talk about some of the most important subjects that are affecting the islands now and into the future. Energy, clean energy, we need it. We often run into new ideas that we had not thought about before. We did just today, and I think we're going to have more of that in the future. So come on down and watch us 4 to 5 on Wednesdays, and we'll see what happens.
We'll see you then. Aloha.
Aloha.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako. Every week we're here on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'd like to say thanks to Jay Fidel and the terrific crew down here at ThinkTech Hawaii. We're at the Pioneer Plaza on 904th Street Mall here in Honolulu. So if you're watching from out of state, come and visit us and help build our economy, and we'll come and visit you, and we'll work together with global synergy. Today, my guest is the mayor of the County of Maui, a unique place in which we can actually see an incubator on how to govern, how to get things done. Perhaps a model for the state and for the federal government, free of some of the encumbrances from the top down, because everything has to be bottom up. We'll go right back into our conversation with Mayor Arakawa. Mayor Arakawa, tourism is a concern for us in Hawaii because we're a mature industry in tourism. We've plateaued in many ways, and we're really struggling on the island of Oahu as we see competition from all across the world for destination spots. Maui, on the other hand, has kept up a very vigorous tourist industry. What's going on there that we can learn from?
Well, one of the things that we realized quite a while back is that we also have to supplement the programs that are promoting Maui's tourism. And for Maui County, we supplement for over $3 million a year. That, and we're also doing direct communications with a lot of our tourist partners. Now,
so you don't just go through the Hawaii Visitors Bureau, you actually conduct direct marketing efforts with other destinations across the world.
Yes, we do. Now, for instance, with the APEC conference, one of our directives was to work with Korea. And since then, we've created a relationship with Goyang, a sister city. We've been going back and forth with them. And because of our relationship, we've been on Korean national TV a number of times. We've been in the front pages of their newspaper. This last year, we participated in their flower festival as we did the year before. And we actually came in the top 2 prizes. So we were in the national newspaper. At the same time, the ferry was sinking. We donated our prize back to the rescue effort. That also made their paper. Their governor and mayor have been coming to visit Maui along with the contingencies, and we go and visit them. Now, when you go to Korea now, Maui has become more of a household name because we actually have a one-to-one relationship. Now, it also allows us to be able to work with companies like Samsung. And we've toured their industries, and you know, Samsung is huge.
Yes.
They have headquarters and offices space that are city blocks. Many people don't know that Samsung's major industry is construction. They construct a lot of bridges and large construction projects are their forte. They also are, you know, technologically very advanced. And there are quite a few companies in Korea that are also as equally advanced. In Japan, companies like Hitachi are worldwide. So by touching bases with them, we get to be able to build much more.
I think you've shared with me that you've done some travel, in fact, on behalf of Maui to Asia.
Yes, we have. I was 2 years back now. I was actually asked to speak at a world conference in China, and in that world conference there were over 40 nations that were present, and we got to speak on the same stage with presidents of other countries. It's the ability for us to be able to bring that Maui name and the Maui reputation out to the rest of the world that's allowing us to be able to maintain a presence. By the way, just as a sidelight, I was also made a member of the Budapest Club while I was in China. I've also spoken at various conferences in Japan, and it's this kind of thing that allows us to become a name in other countries. Now, we've also done television conferences, and our exposure is geared around trying to get the average person from countries that are emerging, that are becoming economic powers, to be able to think Maui first. And if they want a vacation, they come over to Maui, and when their leaders are coming here to visit us, and we build these one-on-one relationships, when they're coming to visit us, their community follows. And they're looking at what it is that we have to offer.
What a boost for Maui. Now, life on Maui, though, is not without controversy. Currently, we're in the midst of a GMO controversy with a measure on the ballot for November. What are your thoughts about what's going on Maui?
Well, it's kind of a shame it's becoming a very, very bitter contest where people are actually threatening other people, and a lot of graffiti and very harsh language. This is the kind of campaign that was never happening before, and that's really the crime of it all.
Well, where is that campaign from? Is this local to Maui, or are there forces outside of Maui that are driving it?
Most of the emphasis seems to be coming from forces outside of Maui. The anti-GMO bill initially was sponsored and brought up from a lot of people that were outside of state, and there's a lot of money that's been coming in from outside of state. First to create the bill and to start the process. People were given $5 for a signature on a petition. So this is the first time I've ever heard of anyone being paid to sign a petition.
Well, what do the proponents of anti-GMO hope to accomplish? What are they trying to gain on Maui?
I'm not sure. I think right now it's become such an emotional issue that logic has kind of lost its place. Now, understand that every place that we import animal feed from, or we import food products from, most of them don't label. And for us to be able to expect that we're going to know what is GMO and what is not, when it's not labeled, it's going to be very difficult.
So that at the very least, there are pragmatic problems with implementing the law.
There's going to be huge problems with trying to implement the law. And in the law itself, they specify that the pollen from like a papaya can spread out. They use the example of the papaya on the Big Island. It's spread out, and over 50% of the non-GMO papaya now have been infected. With this kind of spread, it's going to be very difficult to figure out what is and isn't GMO. And part of it is also saying that once you've contaminated, you can never decontaminate. So the soil and the water is contaminated forever. It doesn't make scientific sense, and I'm sure it's going to be challenged on a scientific level and a legal level. With Kauai, the Department of Agriculture and the federal level controls, the courts rule that they have control and not the county. I'm sure we're going to run into very similar types of challenges in court if it were to pass.
I recall that when the GMO controversy kind of rolled over from Kauai to Maui, you had a very conciliatory response that has become firmer now, obviously because we need to protect the community.
Well, and what I'm asking people to do is actually read the bill. Most people sign a petition and never looked at the bill itself.
There you go.
They didn't have one to look at. And the vast majority of people that I talk to have never been given the documentation and read the bill. So I'm asking people to actually read the bill, understand what they're voting for, and make sure that whatever way they vote, they're going to be able to live with the consequences.
You've been in the role of having to be a peacemaker and yet get things done, and you're not unfamiliar at all with controversy. What is your reading of the growing Hawaiian sovereignty movement?
Well, the Hawaiian sovereignty movement is something that's been going on for a number of decades, and it hasn't gained a whole lot of traction because the various organizations all want to be king. And when you have everybody wanting to be in control, you don't have everybody working as a group, and it becomes very problematic for the sovereignty movement. Now, the other challenge is that there are many people of Hawaiian ancestry that are also progressing very well within our community. You know, I can say that in our family, my cousin Keli'i Akina is the head of Hawaiian Studies in the University of Hawaii Hilo. We've got family members that are doing very well. Louis Hokuano was just named chancellor for UH Maui College. There's a huge group that's actually gone through making a very good name for themselves in society in the way we have it. And most of these people are not involved in the sovereignty movement. Most of these people are not trying to gain a benefit without earning it. So I think the sovereignty movement, unless they can really change the direction they're going, is going to run into a lot of problems as the blood quantum for Hawaiians spreads out. Now, we're also living in a time where we're internationalizing the United States and the world. So the globalization of different cultures is occurring while we're trying to centralize a culture. While the Hawaiian community may gain an identity, at the same time, I think everyone who is in the job market is realizing, well, we need to be able to spread that out.
Yes.
So, as you know, we start working more with China, Korea, and all these other countries, it's going to be much harder to concentrate the population base on Hawaiians. And if you look at the statistics on the population of Hawaiians with a sizable blood quantity, 50% or more, it's a very, very small group even in Hawaii. The vast majority of the population is now non-Hawaiian.
Interesting remarks, and it looks like you've thought this issue through quite a bit. Let me conclude with this thought, because we've only got a few minutes left. As you've seen the political changes here in Hawaii in the post-Inouye and now post-Abercrombie era, if we call it that, well, what do you see happening to Hawaii politically?
I think that Hawaii is going to have to undergo some real big self-examinations as from the political systems. A one-party system, the way it's been right now, whether you believe in it or not, people are beginning to see that there are many challenges that are not being met. The school system is getting very bad. A lot of the infrastructure problems are getting bad. The overall budget and how we're dealing with the environment is bad. As people start seeing more and more of these things not working, I think they're going to be more and more inclined to look at people that are solving the problems rather than just speaking of rhetoric. And we're going to support a party just because the party exists. I think it's going to diminish more and more. This is why I also think that we're having fewer and fewer people voting, because the interest is not in the political parties so much. It's what are we actually getting done for people in Hawaii.
What would it take to get more people involved in the electoral process?
They have to feel that government is actually very, very interested in making their quality of life better, and what government does affects their specific quality of life. If they have a personal interest in government and what's happening, then they will tend to be more involved in government. I think most people feel the government is sort of moved away from them. It's another entity, and they want to live their lives and just do things as they want to do because they don't think they can affect government.
Well, it sounds like we've come full circle, because the level at which government has the most impact on people is that local level at the city and county, and that's where you do your work.
Right.
Mayor Arakawa, I want to thank you for being on our program today.
Thank you very much, Keli'i.
Enjoyed listening to you, and we'll take that off in just a moment, but I'll give a clue to the rest of our audience out here. Thanks for being with us today with the mayor of the island and the County of Maui. We've learned a lot and certainly wish him well. And he's going to step out of the studio in just a moment, but don't go away. We have a resident of the island of Maui who's grown up there, who has his perspectives on what's going on the island. Mr. Joe Kent will be joining us right after this short break. I'm Keli'i Akina. You're watching ThinkTech Hawaii's Ehana Kako, which means let's work together. Be right back.
Aloha, this is Martin Despang, co-host of the Urban Transcendence Show by Alejandra Yamashita and Martin Despang. And me being an architect and an educator in architecture, I'm really interested in that we make our urban environment here in downtown Honolulu as exciting, invigorating, and challengingly beautiful as our wonderful paradise natural environment. I'm going to bring in guests. Aloha, this is Martin Despang, co-host.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen. I'm the host of Likeable Science on ThinkTech Hawaii. We talk about why people should like science, why science is actually fun, how science is a dynamic and vital part of everyone's life, why everyone, every man, woman, and child on the planet should really know science, should love science, should be familiar with science. So it's a great show. People come on here and have interesting conversations with us. They tell us why they do what they do, why they love it, why we should love it too. I hope you'll join us every Friday, 1 to 2 p.m. And of course, you can see it anytime on YouTube. Aloha.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Aloha and welcome back to Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. As earlier mentioned, I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, and we've just been on with Mayor Alan Arakawa, Mayor of the County of Maui. That was fascinating. So I've asked to do a wrap-up here with us, one of our team members at the Grassroots Institute, one of our new policy analysts, Mr. Joe Kent, who's actually from the island of Maui. Joe, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much.
Well, Joe, what did you think about hearing the mayor, your mayor, really here on the program?
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting to hear mayors because they think of government in a similar way that individuals think of government. Individuals sort of think of government as this thing above you, and mayors also think of it that way because they're at the county level.
That's right.
And they see government above them. And so I just think it's so interesting to see that
That's an
dynamic.
interesting thought, because we usually think of the individual having that perspective that government is on top of us, but when you see a level of government that has that same feeling, what does that do? Does that make that level a little more empathetic, a little more responsive to the individual?
Well, I think that it makes mayors value less government in some areas. They see, oh, well, if we were allowed to control our own counties and if we were allowed to control our own budgets and our own rules and regulations, then we could create a better government. And they say, oh, those state people, they're fiddling in our affairs. So it's just so funny to see that dynamic.
I know part of your work at the Grassroots Institute is to study and analyze where free markets are growing and so forth. Did you detect anything with respect to the freer markets as Mayor Arakawa was talking, and the way in which he's leading and managing the island of Maui, the County of Maui?
I see that, Maui County, of course, he's a politician and he's a mayor and he's, respected, but during my time on Maui, I did see a problem with the free market, and I just visited this past weekend, and I saw all these businesses closing, and I said, oh, that business is closed, and that business is closed, and okay, he might be saying that the free market is being productive over there, but from what I see a lot of businesses closing. So. And
that's a kind of a ground level observation.
Right.
What are the causes for the loss of jobs and the closing of businesses? What do you think they are on the island of Maui, and how do they relate to perhaps the whole state?
Well, one very simple idea is the 50% rule, which is any developer who wants to try to build something, 50% of the land has to go to affordable housing. And so you think immediately, oh, this will create more affordable housing. But what it actually does is it creates less affordable housing, as I saw in a documentary that I produced.
So it's something that looks good on the outside because sentimentally we want more affordable housing, actually restricts developers in such a way that we end up with less affordable housing.
Exactly. And another thing that restricts a lot of businesses on Maui, I went through and looked at the top 10 laws that restrict business on Maui. And number one was licensing laws. There's all kinds of licensing laws that people need licenses to be a massage therapist or a florist or a natural health healer, and all these things where you kind of say, why do they need a license? It seems like anyone should be able to do that kind of thing.
So I think I know where you're going here. You're saying when you add up all of these things government requires, whether the way government strategizes affordable housing or the licensing requirements for different occupations, and I'm sure we could list much more
right.
if we went on
right.
and on, we end up seeing an economy in which the government has its fingers intimately handling so much
right.
that it actually restricts the free market.
And right now we see this Maui County, well, it's a GMO ban, and I know that's really controversial, and I went down and was kind of asking people, how would this affect businesses? And some people said this will not affect businesses at all. Businesses can go on as usual. But if you think about it, a ban on GMOs or a ban on food, that is controversial, of course that would have a huge impact on lots of businesses. So, for example, if somebody wanted to grow a papaya in their backyard, they could be fined $50,000 and a year in jail. That seems like a pretty harsh penalty for growing a papaya.
Well, as Mayor Arakawa said, we actually have to look at the law itself that's being proposed. And I've read it on the encouragement of people like Mayor Arakawa, and it's right in there. Draconian penalties for minor infringements, even some that might occur accidentally, or if a neighbor of yours doesn't like you, they might plant something with GMO in your yard, and so forth. There doesn't seem to be enough protections built in, and it seems to be something that would harm the individual and harm small businesses.
Of course, if I want to give the other side a chance, basically they're saying that these foods are controversial and they're unsafe. And so should we be producing food that's unsafe? It's a good question. And so they say, well, we want to test the foods and we want to make sure that they're safe for our keiki, and so let's test it for, it's just a temporary ban, they say. But at the same time, I kind of ask, are organic foods safe? Are all organic foods proven to be healthy and safe, or should we test those foods as well? And so there are a million things you can ask. Is this really safe, or is this dangerous?
Underlying your analysis here is the possibility, of the likelihood, in fact, something that we know in many cases, that GMOs actually contribute to the healthy value of foods as well, and prevent us from getting certain diseases and so forth. But it does boil down to a mixed bag for the layperson. So I want to ask you this question. It's a more cultural question. You've lived on Maui. You are immersed in the culture. Now you live on Oahu, where you work with us at the Grassroots Institute. What happens when people find themselves at odds? When they're not willing to trust peer-reviewed science, where they're not really willing to trust what the authorities have actually produced as on an evidence basis, and it boils down to deeply felt passions for and against. What is the hope for society when we find ourselves at such a conflict between people?
I see, if somebody doesn't trust science or doesn't trust that something's safe, that they as an individual have the right to pursue the food, to eat the food or not. And so someone who's afraid of GMO foods, well, just don't eat GMO foods. Eat foods that only say non-GMO, for example. But to say that everyone else in society has to live by my science and my rules, and I don't know if I like that idea. I think it should be up to the individual to decide.
This sounds very similar to what's happened with organic food. Without the requirement of government, for the most part, those who produce and promote organic food have discovered that they have a market out there called the organic food
Right.
people who will go to a down to earth, who will go to a store that offers that. And the free market then provides a solution. Is that what you're suggesting with GMOs?
There's
as
a
well?
market for health, there's a market for quality, and there's a market for that little sticker that says non-GMO. Everybody would love to have a sticker that says non-GMO, and lots of people would love to buy that. It adds value to the product.
Interestingly, one of the major opponents of the anti-GMO bill happens to be a farmer who grows non-GMO products on the island of Maui. And he grows them because there's a market for non-GMO, and he wants to serve that market, but he doesn't want government imposing upon the entire island or the entire state a rule that says you either can't use these GMO seeds, or you have to label them in some way that's going to just be tremendously expensive.
Right, and of course we're talking very intellectually about this idea, but I went to Maui and I was trying to ask folks, this sort of intellectual debate, what is real, what is not, and where's the science and the studies, and a lot of the protests that I hear do not want to hear the debate. They don't want a discussion. They say stop asking questions and just vote yes or just vote no or whatever it is. And so it's kind of annoying, I guess, when that happens.
Well, I want to respect where they come from, though, because they're operating from a belief system, and many of them are quite authentic in that. One of the things we try to do at the Grassroots Institute, and I don't mean to oversimplify the situation, but to talk about it we need to oversimplify, is to find ways the free market can give solutions. A very simple one would be to encourage people to realize that unless it actually says non-GMO and it's certified by somebody, it's probably got GMO.
Right, exactly.
It's probably been produced with genetically modified organisms. So if you make that assumption from the outset, you become the person yourself and you band together with other people in order to have a store or an industry that produces non-GMO products for your benefit. And this would be something that would work wonderfully if we let commerce go to it, if we let some smart farmers realize, hey, there's a market for people who want this certified non-GMO product. And while that doesn't address all the issues, it does point out that there are many solutions that can take place without the heavy hand of government.
And also, there's something that's very good that's happened with this whole, with all the commotion that's been had on Maui, which is that basically everybody now on Maui has heard of what a GMO is, right? A genetically modified organism. I mean, unless you're hiding under a rock somewhere, everybody pretty much knows, okay, if you go to the grocery store, it's going to be GMO food unless it says otherwise, right?
Well, I think I told you this, that this past weekend I was on Maui, and I stopped at a gas station to fill up again, and found the attendant and a couple of friends of his arguing about what's in the gas. And one of them remarked, oh no, there is GMO in that gas. You can't trust the government. I chimed in and I said, no, that's ethanol.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell if they were joking or not. But here is something I wanted to ask you. Mayor Arakawa and I were talking about the relative relationship between power at the local level and power at the state level and power at the federal level. And I pointed out that at Grassroots Institute, we're trying our very best to get that power down from the federal level back to the states and ultimately back to the county level and fundamentally to the individual and the family. And he seemed to agree that that's the direction that we had to go. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's just so funny, and it has me thinking optimistically that mayors could be an ally in the move towards more individual freedom and more local government. That's just fascinating to me, actually.
Well, you know, one of the parts of the theory of competitive federalism, I expressed the first part, which is getting power down from the federal to the state, back to the city and county and the individual. The other part is at this level, the city and county level, we could have competitors with one another. We could have cities across the nation competing on how to handle this problem better and that problem better. We could have them banding together with each other and so forth. It gives the best of two worlds. One, accountability at the local level, and also it gives us the ability to compete and come up with better solutions. One area that might be applied to is one that's dear to your heart, because you spent your first career as a public school teacher, and that is in the area of education. What do you think about that? Getting education down to the smallest local unit, and each local unit has a distinctive and is competing against thousands of other local units. The consumers say, I'm going to send my kid over here or over there and so forth, so we end up with a better product available to all.
Right, absolutely. Maui, or not Maui, Hawaii is unique in that it's one education department. It's one gigantic education department that encompasses the entire state, and it's one district. So if something, if you want to change a rule on Oahu, that changes the rule for the rest of the state.
Well, maybe we can find a way to get Mayor Arakawa to get interested in sponsoring a new way of looking at schools. He's certainly giving us the possibility with an inter-island ferry system that might be a model for the rest of the state. Thanks very much, Joe. Joe Kent of the Grassroots Institute. I'm glad you were with us today. I'm Keli'i Akina, again, with the Grassroots Institute, saying thank you to the ThinkTech Hawaii for allowing us to partner with them in this weekly program called E Hana Kako. And E Hana Kako is Hawaiian for let's work together. Until next week, aloha.